Hello everyone, I welcome you back to the course on Law of Dispute Resolution in International Trade. This is week 1, session 2, and in this session we are going to discuss about the WTO system, how WTO operates very briefly. Now, what we have covered in the last class, we have seen that how trade issue arises between WTO members, and if those issues come up, how those issues can be resolved, and what is the effective mechanism to resolve those disputes, and why those disputes are brought under WTO dispute settlement mechanism for resolution. So in today's lecture, what we will try to cover over here to give you a fair enough and a brief understanding of WTO framework. Now, if you want to understand the WTO framework which came in the year 1995, you have to go in the past first. In the past, what has happened, as you all must be aware of World War II. So during World War II, when the World War II was in its final phases, the Allied countries, they realized this thing that after this, we need to build the global economy. And how this is possible? It is only possible when there is an economic cooperation among the countries. So this was the thought, because if you were going to see the events which has happened prior to World War II, that was the time where the entire world was witnessing economic isolation. So they were very clear in their mind, the Allied powers, that once the World War II is over, they don't want to go to that particular situation again where the countries, they are living in isolation, because cooperation is required. So for that very reason, immediately after World War II, what they thought of, let's build a global cooperation, and this is only possible through different institutions which they thought of. And for that very reason, they met in Bretton Woods. They thought that let's create 3 institutions which will going to help to build the world economy, and apart from that, they're going to rely upon the model of economic cooperation rather than economic isolation. In 1994 and in 1945, the finance ministers of each and every country, they met at Bretton Woods, and there they conceived 2 institutions. The one institution is popularly known as World Bank. The second institution is known as IMF. And these 2 institutions were conceived to build the global economy, which was in a way distracted during the World War II. And this new model was based upon economic cooperation model, not economic isolation model. The third aspect, the third institution which they thought that which is required to build this global economy was associated with trade. But the problem was why in Bretton Woods they were not able to come up with the institution which was related to trade, because these conferences were attended by finance ministers, not trade ministers. So after Bretton Woods institutions, when these 2 institutions were conceived, US President, he met with UK Prime Minister, and somehow they agreed that we need to have an institution which will going to look after the needs of trade, because the countries, they rely upon trade with each other, and for that very purpose they need to regulate the aspect of trade, as I have already explained you this part in the first lecture, that how import and exports are required and happens among the countries. But the thing is that this needs to be regulated also. So US issued a draft, and if you will going to see that the entire discussion related to come up with the institution which will going to regulate trade was done based upon this draft only, which US has given to the countries, okay, like-minded countries. And this draft was known as ITO, International Trade Organization draft, and all the negotiations, they happen on this ITO draft only. And till 1948, they were in a position, they have done the negotiations, they have formed a structure, and that structure is known as Havana Charter. And if you were going to study this further, this is known as Havana Charter for Trade Regulation. So this was supposed to be the result of extensive negotiation. But at the same time, some countries, they were aware the objective of this ITO Havana Charter is too broad. This will going to take some time before it would be implemented. So what they thought that after World War II, the countries, they are still in trade, and that aspect of trade is not regulated. Countries, they are still practicing economic isolation, and which can result into some sort of further problems. So what they thought that let's ITO be negotiated, and with a parallel track we will going to negotiate an agreement which can be implemented immediately, which will going to regulate the trade aspect, and this will going to become a part of ITO only. So on a parallel track, they started a negotiation on Journal Agreement on Tariff and Trade. So around 1948, when ITO discussions were done, when the draft of Journal Agreement on Tariff and Trade was done, then these agreements has gone to the United States for the ratification. But what US Congress did, they rejected the decision of US to join the ITO, because what the Congress stated that the vision of ITO charter is too broad and this will not going to work for US interests. And seeing this particular aspect, when the other countries who participated in the negotiation process of ITO, when they realized this thing, that if US is not a party to ITO, there won't be any use of this particular charter. And for that very reason, the other countries, they also didn't join the ITO charter. And the end result was what? They ultimately, they left with one option. The option was a parallel track negotiation, which was going under the draft of Journal Agreement on Tariff and Trade. So they agreed to that particular part, and that part was ultimately converted into a final agreement. This is known as Journal Agreement on Tariff and Trade 1947. And for almost 47 years, this agreement alone has managed to regulate the trade. And remember this thing, WTO came into existence in 1995 only. And prior to that, how international trade was regulated? International trade was regulated based upon GATT 1947 provisions only. So if you were going to look into GATT 1947 provisions, they are structured in three ways. You have part 1, part 2 and part 3. Part 1 provides for market access and MFN provision. MFN means your most favored nation provision. We're going to see later on this discussion what MFN stands for. In part 2, there were other substantive provisions like national treatment was there, provisions related to imposition of quantitative restrictions, provisions related to anti-dumping, subsidies, all substantive provisions were there. And part 3 was a procedural provision basically. So that's how trade was regulated after World War II through GATT 1947, and later on how GATT 1947 it transformed to your WTO in 1995. Now remember this thing, that GATT was never ever supposed to be an independent agreement. It was supposed to be a part of your ITO only. So if you will going to see your GATT document, you will going to see this document is without having any institutional support, because institutional support was there under the ITO charter, which never came into existence. So in a way, you will going to see that there were various shortcomings to the GATT, and the shortcomings were not because of the reason because the negotiators have not thought of that pretty well. The reason was very simple, because the negotiation to GATT was going on in a parallel track, which was supposed to be subsumed under ITO, and all the defects which you can see on your slide also related to your limited institutional structure, focus mainly on goods, weak dispute settlement process, these were remedied in some way where under your ITO was providing institutional support also. And if you were going to look into the dispute settlement mechanism, because in your GATT there are only two provisions for resolution of dispute, and under ITO you have a dedicated chapter, a detailed provision which was supposed to look into the dispute settlement aspect, but because ITO never came into existence, so GATT was left with birth defect. On your screen, you will also going to see one of the criticism what it was only focusing upon goods. So till that time, the trade was only happening under goods only, under commodities only. No one really thought of that the trade will going to happen in services or in intellectual properties. This issue crystallized mostly around 1970s, because till that particular time, trade was not just restricted in goods, the trade was also happening under services and intellectual property, right? So around 1970s, for the very first time, they realized this thing that trade cannot be restricted just to goods, but it has to give its coverage to services and intellectual property also. And when WTO came into existence in 1995, for that very reason, okay, it covered the three aspects of trade, which includes your trade in goods, trade in services, and trade in intellectual property. Now, you must be wondering that how WTO came into existence. Now, let me just give you a fair idea about this. In 1947, when GATT, a standalone agreement, came into existence, what has happened after that? Now, after that, around 8 negotiation rounds happened. Uruguay Round negotiation was the 8th round of negotiation through which the WTO came into existence. Now, in all these 8 rounds of negotiations, what has happened? The first thing was, each and every round of negotiation, they were going for liberalization of trade. So what they have done, in order to liberalize trade, they were reducing tariffs. In some rounds, the tariffs were reduced from 5%, 10%, 15%, so that at least the world should be in such sort of situation where the tariff walls are not there. Okay, and if you were going to see the reduction of tariffs, developed nations are the one who has reduced their barriers in tariff substantially in comparison to developing nations. And in few other round of negotiations, you will going to see that the negotiations, they went beyond tariff barriers to non-tariff barriers also. For example, your Tokyo round of negotiation. So these are examples of various round of negotiations. And the last round of negotiation is a Uruguay round of negotiation. They realize this thing. In order to have a well-functioning mechanism of rules and regulations related to trade, GATT is not sufficient for that very purpose. We need to have an institution which can take care of each and every situation. So if you were going to see the agenda of Uruguay Round negotiation, the first agenda was this should not be just limited to goods, it should include services, it should include your intellectual property also. Apart from that, the rules of doing trade on all these three aspects, services, goods, intellectual property, they should be strengthened now. Apart from that, we need to have a strong formal dispute settlement mechanism. So all these things, they were included in Uruguay round of negotiations. And this round of negotiation, it went from 1986 to 1994. And in 1995, we got our WTO. It removed per se all sort of defects which were there earlier in your GATT 1947. Apart from that, whatever problems the GATT 1947 has faced till 1994, all those problems were also rectified. So towards the end in 1995, we got a well-established, fully functional body to regulate each and every aspect of international trade, which is known as World Trade Organization, in short WTO. Now, if you will going to look into what are the objectives of WTO, if I have to summarize that in just one line, this is liberalization of trade. And how liberalization of trade is possible? When countries will going to remove any sort of trade barriers. And what are trade barriers? There are only two types of trade barriers are there. The first is a tariff barrier, other is a non-tariff barrier. in the previous discussion, we have seen the example of tariff barrier also, non-tariff barrier also. So if you will going to see various agreements, you will going to see the thrust is what? The thrust is that these barriers should be eliminated. And to an extent, WTO has achieved that particular part. If you will going to see the barriers like tariffs, they are heavily reduced. And when it comes to non-tariff barriers also, they are still regulated. Apart from that, what are the other objectives of WTO? You will going to see, because you have well-defined rules and regulations, it provides security and predictability to your international trading system. Let's say if I am one of the exporter from India, if I want to export any good or services to any of the country, now I know that what are the rules and regulations. In that way, because of these rules and regulations, that how these activities are regulated, this is providing me what? A security and predictability in the market. Based upon that, I can come up with a very informed choice that whether I need to export this particular item to XYZ countries or not. At the same time, what all things I want to import from these countries. So I am making a very informed choice now. Apart from that, what WTO is further doing, it is providing a forum for further negotiations. Whatever barriers which still exist in the trade, that can be reduced through negotiation process. So WTO, if you will going to look into, so there is a continuous negotiation process going on, and the effect and effort is what? That whatever barriers to trade exist, they should be eliminated. So each and every aspect is regulated over here. And mostly, if I am arguing this thing, if I am saying this thing that WTO provides a set of very comprehensive rules and regulations, the thing is that these rules and regulations, they need to be enforced also. And the enforcement is only possible when you have an effective dispute resolution system. As I have given you a brief idea about the effectiveness of WTO dispute settlement system, again you can see it over here that this is one of the strength of WTO. This is one of the objective of WTO. We should have a very effective dispute resolution mechanism, because this will going to help us out to enforce the rich rules and regulations which is being harvested through Uruguay Round negotiation. So this is the objective of your WTO. And if you will going to see the key areas, and I'm quite sure that now you have a fair enough idea that how your WTO operates. Now, to give you a further understanding on this thing, we have a one foundational document which is known as your WTO agreement, which is also known as Marrakesh agreement, because this was agreed in the Marrakesh. And if you will going to see your Marrakesh agreement, there you will going to find annexures attached to it, and these annexures are the one which regulates international trade. Like you have an annexure on trade in goods, and for trade in goods there are various other agreements are there, like your anti-dumping agreement is there, subsidy agreement is there, safeguard agreement is there. I'm quite sure that some of you at this particular stage might not be aware that what your safeguard agreement stands for, what dumping stands for, what subsidies stand for. So when we will going to discuss the specific cases in the coming lectures, then I'm going to explain whenever it's required that what subsidies stands for, what dumping stands for, what safeguard stands for. But as of now, just remember this thing, that under goods there are various other agreements are also there which facilitates trade. Then we have provisions regarding services, then we have provisions for your trips, and ultimately we have a dispute settlement understanding. All these provisions are given under annexures to your WTO agreement, which is a Marrakesh agreement. We have Annex 1. Under Annex 1, you will going to have Annex 1A, 1B and 1C, which covers your goods, services and intellectual property. Then you have Annex 2. Annex 2 covers your dispute settlement understanding, which is the main thrust of this course. Then in Annex 3, we have an institution where we provide negotiations, not per se negotiations, but what we mostly looked at what sort of policies the countries are pursuing, And Annex 4 is also there to Marrakesh Agreement. Annex 4 means over here is it is related to certain agreements which are known as plurilateral agreements. So what we should focus upon over here is that we should see the scope of WTO, but end of the day, the thrust lies in understanding your WTO dispute settlement mechanism only. Now, if you will going to see that what are the core principles of WTO, remember this thing that these core principles can be traced in goods, in services, and in your IP. Now, the provisions which I'm going to discuss over here, they are mostly related to goods only because that's the major aspect of your international trade. Now, what is the meaning of your MFN and national treatment? Remember this thing, these are known as principle of your non-discrimination. Now, what is the meaning of MFN is most favored nation. And all these principles, they only work on WTO members. And as I have told you in the first lecture that currently there are 166 members are there. And these 166 members, they represent 99% of the international trade. So all the effective players, they are part of your WTO. This is first thing. Let's see what is the meaning of your MFN. Most favored nation. Let's say if India is giving any sort of benefit to those goods, let's say which are coming from US. Benefit is in the form of import duties. Let's say India is importing EV batteries from US, and on that India is charging an import duty of 5%. And similar, a EV battery is also being imported from European Union and China, and from them we are charging 10% import duty. So now you will going to see a discrimination over here. What is a discrimination? That for US I am only charging 5% import duty, but for my other two trading partners, European Union and China, I am doing what? Charging 10% import duty. So this is a discrimination. So what MFN principle says that if I am giving some sort of treatment to one trading partner, the same benefit needs to be extended to other trading partners also immediately and unconditionally. So if I am charging 5% tariff on the import from US on your EV batteries, then I need to charge same 5% from European Union and China also. I cannot charge 10%. The moment I am doing that, this is a violation of WTO rules, and this results into a dispute which they can take to WTO dispute settlement mechanism. So this MFN is what? Principle of non-discrimination. The second principle of non-discrimination is national treatment principle. Now understand this part, this is little trickier. Now what has happened, what WTO rule says that once any item from any country cross the border after paying the import duty, then those items should not be discriminated with the domestic item. I'll give you an example of that. Let's say the EV batteries, they are getting imported from US, and let's say if they have paid 5% duty and after that they have entered into the commerce of India, after that particular stage, the domestic EV battery and imported EV battery should not be discriminated. They both should get the same treatment. Let's say on your domestic battery, if the VAT is 5%, then for imported EV battery also, VAT should not increase from 5%. They both should be treated similarly. That's the meaning of national treatment. Once any item has crossed the border, after crossing the border, there should not be any sort of discrimination between a domestic product and a imported product. This is known as national treatment. So this is the core foundation of principle of non-discrimination, and you will going to find these provisions across agreements like for services, for IP, and for your goods also. But when it comes to your services and IP, they work differently. So you cannot have a uniform application, but this is the meaning which stands for your MFN and national treatment. And apart from that, if you will going to see all these trade agreements, they provide for transparency also. You know transparency, that whenever any country comes up with any sort of rules and regulations which will going to affect trade, they need to duly notify that. So these are examples of your transparency. And remember this thing, that what is the core essence of these WTO rules and regulations? Predictability in the trade policy of a member, and apart from that, you need to do a progressive liberalization of trade. That's the core essence. So these are few of the core elements of your WTO agreements, which you will going to find or trace through various agreements like under Annex 1, Annex 2, Annex 3. Now, another important aspect which is provided under your WTO agreement, which is also known as Marrakesh Agreement, that how WTO operates. So if you will going to see the functioning of WTO, it works through various bodies. The first and a primary body, and any important decision over here is taken in the ministerial conference. So all the trade ministers from the countries, they attend this particular meeting. In every 2 years, you have this particular meeting. So whatever the important decisions are, they've been taken in the ministerial conference. And from the side of India, who will going to attend this meeting? The trade minister. And who is our trade minister? Piyush Goyal ji is our trade minister. So he's going to attend this ministerial conference. And ministerial conference happens in every 2 years. And if ministerial conference is not there, let's say ministerial conference happens in every 2 years, so we cannot defer our each and every decision for a 2-year window. So meanwhile, all the decisions are taken care by General Council. So in General Council, who all participates? The ambassadors of the countries to WTO, they participate in a General Council. So this is the second tier. So in the absence of ministerial conference, because all the important decisions are taken in the ministerial conference, but if ministerial conference is not there, then you can rely upon General Council, who all are members of General Council, the representative of 166 members through ambassadors and delegations, they take decisions in General Council. And after that, you have Council for Trade in Goods, Services and TRIPS. These are 3 committees to supervise the functioning of goods, services and IPR. So these committees also take care of some businesses related to your goods, services and TRIPS. Then apart from that, subcommittees are there. But if you're going to trust me that which one is the important committee which takes important decision, it is a ministerial conference, General Council. And after that, when it comes to the supervision of your dispute settlement system, because that is a thrust for us for our course, is dispute settlement body. So General Council and DSB is one and same thing. But when this General Council, it looks for the dispute settlement business, then this is known as your dispute settlement body. This will not known as General Council. Members are one and same. The representatives are one and same. But now it is known as dispute settlement body, because this is now exclusively looking after a dispute aspect, managing your Annex 2 agreement, DSU agreement. So this is the case. I am quite sure that now you must have understood that how these bodies, they functions generally. And remember one very important aspect over here, that how these bodies, they take decisions. They take decisions based upon consensus. Consensus means a unanimity. So nothing over here happens through the majority voting. Though if you will going to see your WTO agreement under Article 9 over there, you will going to see that there is a possibility of voting if the consensus has not been achieved. But so far, not even a single decision is being taken based upon the voting pattern. So each and everything is decided, whether it's a ministerial conference, be it General Council, be it Goods, Services or TRIPS Committee, be it DSP. The decision has to come through consensus. So this is one of the important element in a decision-making process. So in the last class also, I explained you about the dispute settlement system, how it generally functions. So I am giving you another insight to that about the stages. Don't worry about this thing that if I am not going into the detail in these stages, because we're going to cover these stages individually in the coming lecture. The first stage is consultation, which means an amicable way of resolving dispute, negotiation between a complainant and respondent. If that's not working out, then you go to the adjudication stage, which is panel and appellate body stage, and whatever their results are, those results are binding upon the parties. And if they are not complying with the decisions of adjudicatory bodies, then they have to face the consequences. What are consequences? They have to face the trade sanctions. So this is a structure which we will going to discuss in detail in the coming lectures. Now, I'm quite sure that in this lecture, you must have understood that how WTO came into existence from GATT to WTO, what was the journey, what was the loopholes, and how WTO functions, what is the coverage of WTO, and how dispute settlement system works as one of the effective mechanism for enforcing the entire trade obligations under WTO. In the next lecture discussion, we will going to read about how in the initial years under your GATT 1947, the dispute settlement system have functioned, what was the procedure, what were the challenges, and how this has helped out to conceive a better and updated model of dispute settlement system under WTO. Thank you.